Well, hello everyone and welcome in. My name's Rick Farron and we got a program tonight, Returning to Light, here on the Six Screens Telenetwork. And we have Roland. Roland's coming in from Illinois. And I'm sorry, Roland
Chad's
is not
Illinois.
coming in. We have just trying to adjust a couple of things here. We have Chad coming in from Illinois. Roland coming from the United Kingdom won't be making it in tonight. But anyways, we got Chad. So Chad, what you going to be talking about tonight?
Well, tonight we're going to be building off of the last episode of Returning to Light, and we're going to continue talking about addiction, but this time we're going to take it a different direction. We're going to start talking about the freedom from addictions that we can have after we leave a cult.
Well, sounds interesting. I know the Jehovah's Witnesses, even though they're not too quick to admit it, but there's a lot of people with addictive problems in that organization. So looking forward to the program, Chad. I'm here if you need me. So I'll bring you up and I'll step out of the scene here and it's all yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Rick. So, everyone, I want to thank you all for tuning in and letting me come into your Saturday night and spend an hour or so with you. And I want to thank Roland for his hard work and all the trouble he goes through. And unfortunately, he's a bit under the weather, had to go into hospital, but he's going to be out soon and everything's going to be fine and dandy like cotton candy. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about addiction and problems in the Watchtower with addiction. And tonight we're going to continue that theme, but we're going to take it in a slightly different direction. And at the same time, we're also going to be talking about having freedom from addiction. And I'm a firm believer that freedom, no matter what your addiction is, freedom is attainable. It is something you can achieve. It is something you can have. So without any further ado, I do want to go ahead and, Rick, if you could put up the phone number for people, it's 727-731-6701 if you're in the U.S. And I want to thank, I was speaking with a couple people this past week, and I'm not going to mention their names. But I do want to thank them for talking with me on the phone in person. I had a great opportunity to fellowship with a young man, and I think he's watching tonight. He may have had to work, but I do want to thank these people who've stepped up, and they've given me perspective, and they've given me ideas of things to speak about. And, last time we talked about the addiction of things like drugs, alcohol, and the physical addiction. But tonight I want to talk a little bit about mental addiction, which is something we don't often hear about. And you may ask yourself, what in the world is a mental addiction? And what it boils down to is it is any pattern of thought that begins to consume our lives. When we have a certain pattern of thought that begins to just permeate everything we think, everything we believe, everything we do, and that pattern of thought starts to affect how we live our lives, the relationships that we have with other people, it is becoming a very toxic addiction. And there are mental addictions. Probably the most common addiction there is the addiction to fear. And yes, fear can be a mental addiction. There are people in this world that cannot live without having something to be scared of. And I know that sounds like a strange concept, but it's a real one. My grandmother, she was one of these people. She could not function apart from fear. We lived in a very, very, very safe neighborhood. I lived with her, and she couldn't be any safer, but she was so scared. She would always keep the door locked, whether it was at night or in the middle of the day. And I mean, this is in a safe area she was doing this. And it's not we don't live in a big city. So it was a very strange concept to me, because my whole time growing up, at nighttime we would lock the front door, but we always left our back door unlocked. Even if we went on vacation, we could be gone for a week or 2 weeks, and even if we were gone for that long, we'd still leave our back door unlocked. So it was really a strange and foreign concept to me. Looking back now as an adult, I can see that there was an addiction that my grandmother had to fear. Another type of addiction that I can see is an addiction to negativity. And I remember a couple of years ago, my dad died. And there was a lot. That's a very trying time. If anyone has ever lost a parent, they know exactly what I'm talking about. It was a very trying time for me. Not to mention, I had 2 half brothers and my sister, my half sister. My brothers were, they showed up just when Dad died, and I haven't really seen them since. My sister was the one who was left with all the decision-making responsibilities, but she didn't want to make any decisions. So everything fell upon me. And finally, I had to preach his funeral. It was a very difficult time. And things did not go as smoothly as I hoped, because as I stood before everyone, my own personal emotions welled up inside of me, and I tried to maintain composure, and I began stumbling and fumbling all over the place. And that was probably, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. And even now, to this day, my mom will bring up the horrible job I did, at my dad's funeral. And I'll admit it was not the best. I'll openly admit that. But I do believe it wasn't as bad as it could have been. It was better than some funerals. But a funeral is always hard to perform. But then having to do your own father's was something else. So I would say that that's an example of someone who's addicted to negativity. And I have some traits of that. I always think of the negative first. I always think of the possibility of what can go wrong. I'm a big believer in Murphy's Law, which says whatever can go wrong will go wrong. So, there's an addiction to negativity, even on my part. And yes, I'm admitting that I have shortcomings. I'm not perfect. And I think that's important, that we be honest with ourselves and even the people around us. I think that's a big step in finding some healing. Another form of addiction, and I'm going to cover 4. The third one I wanted to talk about was an addiction to hatred. I have seen this in people. I have a relative who divorced, and they have such anger and hatred and bitterness toward their ex. It's ridiculous. To this day, and they've been divorced for years, there is still, and when I say years, I mean over a decade, there is still, after over a decade, just pure bitterness and hatred and anger built up towards their former spouse. And I can understand being angry at someone. Being angry is not the problem. But when you are consumed by hatred, that does become a problem. That will start affecting your mental health. That will start affecting your physical health. And all types of other issues will spring from that. So I wanted to point that out. And another point I have to bring out about that loved one I have is they have no children with their former spouse. So there's nothing connecting them to this person anymore. But even after 10 years, they can't let go. And one person in the chat brings up a good point. If we don't forgive others, we're not going to be forgiven. And I want to touch on what forgiveness is. Forgiveness does not mean that everything is fine again. Forgiveness means you are relieving a person of their responsibility for the pain they have caused you. You let go of their responsibility of that, and you simply no longer hold them accountable for it. That doesn't mean you're best of friends again. That doesn't mean you have to have a great relationship with them. What it means is you are no longer going to let what they did that hurt you affect you anymore. You are no longer. I know I went through a time where I was severely injured by someone I trusted with my life. It was a close relative of mine, very close. And they had hurt me very deeply. Now, I've forgiven that person. I don't hold any ill will toward that person. I don't wish anything bad for them. I hope they have a great life. But at the same time, because they showed me who they are and they showed me the type of person they are, I will never be close with that person again. I can still be around that person. I can still talk to them, but I don't see a need for it, considering I know, this is what that person does. They're going to do it again. They have a long history of it. I think it's best to just kind of steer clear of that. But they no longer have any power over me, because when you're holding on to hatred and you're holding on to anger, essentially what you're doing is that person you are angry with, that person you hate, they are having control over you, and you are giving them permission to exercise authority or control over you. Part of healing when you come out of a cult is letting go. And I know that's a very hard thing to do. And I'm not saying it's ever in any way, shape, or form an easy thing to do, but it is a necessary thing to do. Not for the sake of the other person always, but a lot of times it's for your own sake. And a lot of times you will not begin to heal until you learn to let go. That can be a very difficult thing to do. The fourth thing I wanted to bring up when it comes to having psychological, mental, emotional addictions is that of pride. Oftentimes we want to think so highly of ourselves. We talk a lot on this network about the narcissism that is found in elders and in the governing body and in the district overseers, ministerial servants, stuff like that. Narcissism and pride go hand in hand. It's pride that causes narcissism, and narcissism builds pride up. So you have to be careful. And really, I think if we start examining all of these four things and we start comparing ourselves to these things and we start asking ourselves, do I suffer from chronic hatred? Am I addicted to my hatred? Am I addicted to my pride? Am I addicted to fear? Am I addicted to negativity? I think at that point, when we start examining ourselves, we can start breaking free of bad patterns of thought in our lives. We can start breaking free of the things that cause damage to us, the things that hurt us emotionally and mentally. And at that point, I think we're making the first step toward finding healing. And I gotta say, when I say healing, I don't mean that life goes to a point where it's as if nothing has ever happened to us. What I'm saying is we learn from our past, and instead of internalizing the negative things that have happened to us in a negative way, we internalize it in a way that is positive, a way that we can use to help others, a way that we can use to teach us lessons, to teach others lessons, something that will build up our character. And those are very important qualities if you want to find healing. But it all comes down to that honesty and that willingness to examine yourselves. In reality, when we're looking at these addictions, what they ultimately lead to is an addiction to self. It becomes all about what I want, what I think, what I feel, what I hear, me, I, self, self, self. And that becomes very toxic. That's where narcissism comes in. And the quickest way to become a narcissist is to develop an unhealthy view of self. When you start thinking too highly of yourself, when you start thinking overly prideful of yourself. So the initial part is we need to start breaking the bonds of negativity, fear, pride, and hatred. When we start breaking those bonds, and you may ask yourself, well, how do you do that? Well, number one, the first thing I already mentioned is to start questioning ourselves. Start comparing ourselves to these character traits and these mental patterns, and ask ourselves, do I have any of these patterns? Is there any type of fear I'm addicted to, negative thinking I'm addicted to? And I'm not saying that you're going to change reality by the way you think, but what you can change by changing your thoughts is your perception of things. And you can begin to perceive things in a different way. I had a friend of mine. Here's an example. He had this really bad habit of always trying to get me in theological arguments with people for no reason, just because he enjoyed not only seeing the argument, but hearing how I would defend the faith. And he did this a few times before I caught on to what he was doing. He was a narcissist and he was manipulative. And I didn't catch it at the beginning, but then I finally did catch him in it. And it got to the point where I just would not entertain these little things he did. I had to start making conscious choices not to fall into his trap. But there was a period before I started making those choices where whenever he would ask a question or we'd be having a conversation with someone, he would say something where I could see what he was doing was manipulating the conversation and trying to get it into an argument or into a debate. And I would just shut him down then and there. And I would just say, look, I know what you're doing. You need to knock it off. It's not about right or wrong. It's not about having an argument. Can't we just have a simple relationship or a friendship conversation with someone without you having to start a fight with us? And he got really upset when I started pointing this out. And then it got to the point where I just didn't fall into the trap anymore. And every time I could see him starting it, I would start changing the direction myself and getting away from the topics he was starting. And that was a difficult thing to do, but I eventually did it. And things started to really change with him. And that's when he started to become really bitter toward me. And I had some bitterness toward him. But once I was able to forgive him of that, and I had to separate from him, now I forgive him. He lives in the Philippines now. He moved away. and he's married now, and I hope the best for him. I don't want anything to do with him. I'm not angry at him. I no longer have any emotional investment against him, but I'm just not going to be friends with someone who's like that. So we need to break these bonds, because what's going to happen is it's going to bring about freedom. We're going to have a freedom from self. It's no longer going to be a constant onslaught of us trying to put ourselves over, trying to make ourselves look better than what we are, trying to impress others about who we are. So we'll be free from that love of self-love, and I'm not talking about the unhealthy love where I'm not talking about the healthy love of self where you take care of yourself. I'm talking about the unhealthy infatuation type of love with yourself. So you can be free from self. And when you start having that freedom, it brings you free from guilt. You no longer have to hold on to any guilt of past mistakes you've made. You no longer have to feel guilty for any of the people you have done wrong. You no longer have to feel guilty for any of the things in your life that have maybe made it hard for you to move on, hard for you to pursue a career that you want to pursue, things that hold you back from finding happiness and joy, things that hold you back from advancing in life and having a successful marriage or a successful family life or a successful career or whatever it is. You can be free from that guilt. And believe me, anyone who knows guilt will tell you it is something that will eat you alive. It will chew you up, and it will spit you out. But it will also, as you break free from these bondages, you're free to find hope. And we just went through November, which in America, and we have Thanksgiving. So that was our season of thanks. And now we're in December, Christmas season, and it's a season of hope. Hope of what could be in the next year. Hope to let go of the things that have happened in the past. Hope of what our lives could be. But it all begins with making some conscious choices. Choices that are going to bring you free from these addictions. Choices that are going to lead you to be a more happy person, a more productive person, a person of joy. It's not always easy. In fact, it's probably some of the hardest things you're ever going to have to do in life. But I think a big part of it is starting to make that choice. I'm not going to get into great detail, but a few years ago, I was having some severe problems. And I was always the type of person where I took care of myself. Whenever there's a problem, I handled it. And I was at the end of my rope, and I was at a place where I couldn't handle it myself. I couldn't do what needed to be done, mainly because I didn't know how. And I finally reached out and I got some counseling. And things were really, really rough. I had a bad counselor at first. Finally, that one left. And then I got another one who was much better. And, things started to get better. But the more I go into life and the more I start thinking about what I can do instead of what I already have done, the better my life becomes. Because I'm no longer dwelling on those things of the past, those things that have hurt me, those things that I've done that have hurt others. I'm no longer thinking about those. Now I'm thinking about the things I can do that will make things better for me, that will make things better for those around me. I'm no longer thinking about what I can get out of something, but I'm thinking about the things I can do that will benefit someone else. And I tell you what, just making those few conscious choices have really made a world of difference in my life. I'm no longer having 2 and 3 and 4 panic attacks per day. And believe me, that's what I was doing. I was having 3 and 4 panic attacks per day before I finally reached out for help and I got some counseling. Now I'm at a much better place. I still have my panic attacks. It's still something I deal with, but it's not something that I beat myself up over having. And one thing I found was that one of the reasons I had my anxiety attacks and my panic attacks was because I was getting anxious about having one. And I would actually cause myself to have these attacks by worrying about having them. Remember when I mentioned before, you can be addicted to mental patterns and thought patterns? That was one of the things I was addicted to. Now, instead of being addicted to those negative things that I know can happen, I am making conscious choices to think on the good things, to think on those things which I find make me happy and will also help others. You know, I was talking with my mother yesterday, and when we were talking about things, and we were talking about this show, because I really didn't know what I wanted to talk about until this afternoon. But in our conversation that me and my mom had yesterday, you know, we were talking about Christmas and how things are, you know, a lot different this year for everybody across the nation, you know. And one of the things we started talking about was Christmas movies. And I said, you know, it's funny, when I was a kid, we used to have that movie Scrooged with Bill Murray in it. And I said, I never really thought too much about it. But now, today, almost 40 years old, it's one of my favorite Christmas movies. And honestly, I can watch it during the month of December, Christmas time, the season of hope. I can watch that movie over and over again, you know, a couple times a week, and I'm happy. But the odd part is I don't watch the entire movie. I don't really care much for the entire movie, but the last 20 minutes is something that just tickles my fancy. It's something that gets me excited and happy because the main character in that movie, his name is Frank Cross. Frank discovers that Christmas, whether you're a believer or not, this season of hope, the Christmas season, there is something miraculous about it. It is a time where we can set apart to think of others above ourselves. And when we do that, we can experience a miracle. We can experience the miracle of making a friend. We can experience the miracle of just doing something selfless to help someone else. It's a time for us, by our giving, we can show the world our best. And I'm not talking about giving of money. You know, Frank even brings up, you can take a blanket out of a closet and give it to a homeless person, or you can make them a sandwich. You know, it's a time where you can connect with lost loved ones. It's a time, maybe you'll think back to your time as a child in school, and you'll wonder whatever happened to some of your classmates or an old teacher. And this is a time of year you can try to make contact with them, just to say, hey, I was thinking about you, and I just wanted to say hi. And I tell you what, when someone out of your past pops in out of nowhere, it is something that can make you feel like $1 million. I know that from personal experience. And I know that's one reason why, you know, my family, we're really big on doing little acts of kindness. It's the little things that matter sometimes in life. And I just want to take a minute to encourage you. Maybe there's someone in your life that you miss. Maybe they're not in your life anymore. If you want to try to reach out and make contact with them, do so. Maybe you have family that is still trapped in the Watchtower. Well, this is still the season of hope. This is a time you could still drop them a postcard, even if they're, you know, if they're in the Watchtower, but they're not, you know, they're in the Watchtower. They're not celebrating the holiday. That's fine. You can still send them a postcard. It doesn't even have to be a Christmas card, but you can just say, hey, I was thinking about you, and I wanted to let you know that I love you, and I hope everything is going well. Just a simple message like that, short, sweet, to the point, and just plant that little seed. You'll never know where it's going to go, what could grow from it. So yeah, I want to go ahead and open up the phone lines now. If anybody has anything they want to say, feel free to call in. The number is 727-731-6701. Hit *6 now. If there's anybody who wants to chime in, feel free just to go ahead and jump right into the conversation. Anybody at all?
Hey, Chad.
Yes, ma'am.
Chad? Hi. I just thought what you spoke about tonight is so appropriate. I have gone through some of the same growth you have as far as negative emotions are. And our life is really the sum total of all the decisions we make and the emotions that we hang on to. And I just wanted to mention, too, that the longer that you hold bitterness or anger towards someone, the harder it's going to be to get rid of. And I found that to be true in my case. So, you know, it's better to, you know, forgive and forget right away, because if you hang on to that anger and bitterness, you're in for it's going to be difficult when you finally decide to, you know, you want to get rid of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So was there anything specifically after you came out of the Watchtower that you had a problem dealing with that you want to share with us, Susan?
Well, when I left the Watchtower, it was at the same time that my former husband decided to divorce me. So I was dealing with those two problems at the same time. And the bitterness and the anger kind of started crossing over between the two, between the marriage and the ex-spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse, and leaving the Watchtower. All those emotions, they're hard to separate sometimes. And as time goes by, though, you know, distance really helps. Distance and time. When people say, "Oh, in time, everything's going to be better," I said, "Yeah, right." But it was true. You know, it takes time sometimes to work through certain emotions and decide where you're going to place them in your life.
Yeah.
So when I finally separated the two, Watchtower and former marriage, it worked out. What made my situation different is after we were divorced, my husband wouldn't move out of the house. So for over 6 months,
It also
he
was
wasn't there. Hello?
Yeah.
Pardon? No, it's
Yeah, I'm listening. Rick had a thing there. Go ahead.
okay. So it just makes it difficult when you're trying to separate yourself from your former life, and he won't leave. So you have to set things. You have to set things in life the way you need them, not the way that they necessarily want them to be. You have to do what's right for you, not what's right for them. So I had
That's
to
right.
separate that, and then I just can't do what's right. I don't have to do what's right for the Watchtower anymore. I still felt as like, quote unquote, Jehovah was looking over my shoulder all the time, and I had to position myself to the way God really thought, not the way the Watchtower thought me God was. Because whenever Watchtower said, Jehovah wants you to do this or that, it wasn't Jehovah, it was the Watchtower.
Right.
Every time you use the word Jehovah, it was Watchtower speak for our organization wants you to do thus and such. So I had to separate that. Once I got everything all separated, it was easier to deal with the anger and the hurt and all those emotions and put them aside and just say, I have to move forward. I can't just get stuck in this swamp of emotion all the time. I have to decide to, get out and start looking more positively toward my future. So that's what I did. And in time, you forgive. And in time, you learn how to, arrange your emotions where they need to be. And I did try to find counseling, but like you, I could not find anyone I really clicked with. I kind of called them like a paid friend,
Yeah.
I could talk to my mother about the same things I talk to them every week. So I was like, I don't know. It's more like a paid companion. So it just didn't work out for me. But that's not to say, don't try it out. And you might find somebody really good that helps you. I just
Right.
to do that. So
Yeah. But I think, you just really I think you're a great example there. When you came out, you were dealing with a lot of things, and you brought up that you were trapped in a swamp, and you brought up that you were it was basically pounded into your head that you should do things this way or Jehovah's not going to be happy. And that was your thought process, that it needed to be this way or God wasn't going to be happy. And then if you didn't do it specifically or you didn't achieve your goal, then it's in your head, oh, Jehovah is not happy with me now because I didn't do this right. And then you have this whole guilt complex. And now all of a sudden you're having an emotional addiction to something that's going to cause guilt or fear. But when you started, like you said, and I'm pointing this out for the listeners, and I want you to tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. Once you started to organize your emotions the way you said, which I think is a really good way of saying it, once you were able to start doing that, you were able to start making better choices. And then all of a sudden you were able to get over things. Would you say that's a good way of saying it?
you said it so well. One thing I want to reiterate is that don't let your bitterness get too deep. At times, the anger is really a comfortable emotion. I don't know if I was addicted to anger, but it was comfortable for me. Those emotions of anger and fear. Not that I wanted to be that way, or like an addict keeps going after the wrong drug. And I just didn't want to let things get too deep. The deeper you go and the longer you hang on to it, the harder it's going to be to get rid of it. Because it just doesn't happen overnight. You go, oh, today I'm going to stop being angry. It doesn't work that way. But as time goes on, you learn how to feel differently. I had to feel the way a Jehovah's Witness felt for 30, well, I was married for 37 years, so 39, 40 years. I was, thinking as a Watchtower, right? Anne Marie likes the
Right.
term Watchtower, right? I like that. So I thought that way for so long that it was new for me to think differently. And
Right.
I stopped judging people the way Jehovah's Witnesses are so judgy for one another. They're not this or they're not that or they don't do this or that. I stopped that. But it took time because when you're in a rut, when you're thinking in a rut, it takes time to get out of that rut. Plus, I was
Yes, it
going
does.
from married to not married. And that, for 37 years, I was married. So that took time to, change over from thinking of, the both of us to just me. And that was better, really, for me to do what was best for just me instead of for the marriage. So, that took time also. But you can't I would be so hard on yourself. There's no time limit for, learning to deal with things. It's just what's right for you and what you take time with, but just don't, be so hard on yourself because the Watchtower is hard on you all the time anyway. So be kind to yourself. And that may be a new thought to people leaving the Watchtower. Be kind to yourself. You're never taught that in the Watchtower, ever. It's a completely new concept. So when you start being good to yourself, it helps you to deal with things that are not so good in your life. Because you have some good things that you're doing for yourself also.
Absolutely. I think you bring up a couple of really good points there. Don't be so hard on yourself.
Points for you.
Go ahead.
I got a couple good points. So what I've learned is don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. Don't reject help when it's offered. Always accept help when it's offered. And remember that we are our own worst critic. And we can, just like she said, we beat ourselves up over stuff.
Yes.
And we have to be nice to ourselves and kind to other people, understanding, sympathetic, and understand everybody's in a different spot as far as recovering, getting out, or whatever. Everyone's on a different step in the path. So
yes.
That's the best thing I can say is to ask for help when you need it and accept help when it's offered.
I think that's some really, really great, solid advice. If more people were willing to accept the help, and I know a lot of people are probably watching this or listening to this, or they will in the future, and they're going to think, wow, he makes it sound like it's so easy. No, I'm not. I mean, it may sound easy, but really what I am challenging the audience to do today, it's extremely difficult. It's probably one of the most extremely difficult things you will ever do in your entire life. And that is to break free from these addictive thought patterns. And trust me, I know how hard it is, because this is something I dealt with from my childhood, and it took me over 30 years until I could finally reach out and do something about it, until I finally got to the point where I was fed up. I am 39 years old, and I was about 35 when I finally said, you know what? I've been trying to do it my way for all these years. It doesn't work. I need to ask someone else for help. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But here I am a few years down the road, 4 years later, things are getting a lot better. And, I would encourage anyone not to just be willing to accept help or ask for help, but also be willing to help others. And, you know, I try to be pretty transparent on this show, and I admitted tonight to some of my hardships I face, some of the problems I've had. And some of those I find to be quite embarrassing, to be totally honest. But I share them with the hope that maybe I can help someone else. And if maybe a little bit of the pain or the embarrassment I feel helps someone else, maybe it's worth it. So, yeah. Is there anybody else? Just hit *6, or if you want to call in at 727-731-6701. But yeah, wow, I thought this is a pretty good topic for tonight. and someone just said revenge is a dish best served cold on a live stream. That old Klingon proverb, revenge is a dish best served cold. So yeah, and I gotta say, some other people speaking about revenge, you want to talk about one of the best forms of revenge you're ever going to get from the Watchtower? If you truly want to get revenge on them, take away their ability to control you. Break free of the thought patterns. Break free of those addictive behaviors and mental patterns, and shed the control that they have on you. You know, I always tell people there's those who are PMO, physically in, mentally out, and there's PME, physically in, mentally in, and there's PIMQ, physically in, mentally questioning. But there's also those who are SI. And that can be, there's POMO, physically out, mentally out. But what do you do about those who are POMOC, POMOSI, physically out, mentally out, psychologically in? That's what I'm talking about right now, are those who are still psychologically in. They are still using the thought patterns that have been ingrained in them by the board. They are still using those. They are still using those addictive mental way of thinking about things in a way that controls them. So even though they can be physically out of the Watchtower, mentally out, want nothing to do with them, psychologically they can still be in the Watchtower because they're controlled by Watchtower programming, Watchtower thinking. And that's something that is worse, in my estimation, than being physically in the Watchtower. I would rather be physically in a cult and be psychologically out of it than be physically out of it and psychologically in it. Because at least if I'm psychologically out, mentally they have no control over me. Mentally, I have control over myself, and I'm able to think conscientiously for myself. I'm able to think conscientiously for my family and about what I want to do, what will make me happy. And I know a lot of people, after they get out of the Watchtower, they just totally give up on God. They don't become Christians, and if that's what you want, no one can force you. You can't even force yourself to come to Christ. But I'll say this: when you are finally out of the Watchtower, until you get yourself psychologically out to where they're no longer having the type of control over you mentally and psychologically, you're still in. And I know that upsets a lot of listeners, and that's okay. I don't expect you all to agree with everything I say. That's my perspective. And I think that's another thing that can really help someone is it's a very old-fashioned technique. It's something that millennials and even a lot of Gen X, Gen X, only some of them learned it. And I guess I'm right in between that Generation X and millennial. I would say that I'm more Gen X, but millennials and Gen Z, they don't understand this. Being able to disagree with someone. A lot of people don't realize you can agree to disagree. You can disagree amicably. And people today don't learn that. And I can't remember where I was going with that now. Not for the life of me.
Hey, Chad?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something and see what you think. Watchtower makes use of black and white thinking. There's right and there's wrong. There's no in between. That's a really hard concept for us to learn, is that there can be more than one answer, or you can agree to disagree. That's a new thought, because when we were like out in the ministry, if people didn't agree with us, we would fight to the death for our point of view. I mean, we were taught to do, because we had the right answer. But there's not always one answer to a question the way we were taught in the Watchtower. So that's, as I said, something new to learn, is that we can agree to disagree or just have more than one answer. There's not always a right and a wrong. And that's a big hurdle to cross.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is. I mean, a lot of things in life come down to a personal opinion. And a lot of things it's like Chevy versus Ford versus Dodge. I live out pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Like, I'm in the central part of Illinois. I'm just 2 hours south of Chicago. I'm surrounded by corn and bean fields. And around here, it's, there's that whole thing. Is it Chevy, Ford, or Dodge the best pickup truck? And I'm a bow tie boy. I love my Chevrolets. But when I go down to Missouri, I have a cousin that's a big Ford guy. And he drives a Chevy because his Ford broke down on him. So I take a lot of joy in that, because his Ford is still broken down after 3 years. But, there's a lot of things where it comes down to personal preference on different things. And it's okay. And like what you're saying, the Watchtower thinking is black and white, right or wrong, in or out. And, they look at it as either I'm right or I'm wrong, you're right or you're wrong. Guess what? Sometimes if you have two people and they're saying different things, there's three possibilities. One is right, one is wrong, or both people are wrong. But the thing is, with Jehovah's Witness thinking, they're never taught that third option of maybe both parties are wrong. So, you brought up a really good point, Susan, about the black and white thinking. I think a good thing to do is look at things that are in shades of gray. I mean, go to Chicago. If you ever get a chance, go to Chicago and find a cart that, the vendors that sell hot dogs from a cart. Go and order yourself a hot dog with ketchup on it. You will get weird looks, but it's still good. It's just people don't do that in Chicago. That's not typical in Chicago. So that's my little joke for the night. And I know it wasn't that funny, very pithy. But yeah, So, anybody else want to chime in? Anybody else have some thoughts? They want to agree, argue, whatever?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello. Hey, my name is Eric, and I'm new to the program and first-time caller. But I like you guys. I appreciate what you do. And when you were talking about PMOs and PMEs and PMQs, it made me realize how many sects that Watchtower has basically created, division. You know, there's so many people with so many different views. No one is really united. It all seems to be horseshit.
Yeah, it's all a facade.
Go ahead.
No, you're right. It's all a facade. They want to look like they're totally uniform, but really they're not. And I remember hearing one guy say, unity does not mean uniformity. But with the Watchtower, they cannot differentiate unity from uniformity. And that's one of their downfalls. And I think that's one of the things when a person comes out of the Watchtower, they need to realize.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this is the time for any PMOs listening out there, and all PMOs. I think it's a time for us to put our foot in the sand. And I'm a POMO, physically out, mentally out, but I think it's time for the PMEs to put their foot in the sand and say no more. Don't do in-person meetings. Don't just, you don't have to lose your life over it, your family and everything, but be firm and don't let them do it, because if you continue to do it, you're going to enable them, and they're going to continue to be Watchtower. If you don't enable them, they're going to just crash and burn.
Yes.
And that was the thought I wanted to send.
This is Chewy.
Yeah, go ahead, Chewy.
Hey, yeah, I like that other there that was talking there that was just on there. I want to confirm what he said. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was in Brooklyn with me, and he's been an elder for years. And it's basically a two-part conversation. The first part, he was telling me, we were talking about guns and stuff, and he's a big gun dude, and so am I. And anyway, he said, "You ever read the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, it says we the people." He said, "What that's referring to is you and me. We should have a right to have whatever." And he was talking every arm, not just AR-15s. He said nuclear. I said, "Wow, we should be able to have those. That's what the Constitution says." And I said, "Wow, this guy's an elder." Then he goes on, and he says, and we start talking a little bit about the organization, and he said, "Yeah, they've been wrong before. I just take what they say as a grain of salt." He said, that's what he said. He said, "The governing body's been wrong before. I just take it as a grain of salt." And it blew me away. This guy's an elder, and he's saying that? So about 2 months later, and it didn't really dawn on me until after the conversation. And then I asked him, I called him again. And about 2 months later, we finally got in contact with one another. And I said, "Hey, what would your body of elders say?" I said, "First off, I'm in agreement with you." I said, "They've been wrong before, the governing body has. But what would your body of elders say if you walked into an elders meeting and you said what you said to me?" He said, "Oh, I wouldn't say it." I went, wow. Yep. I wonder how many more of you are out there like that. You know, that was, one guy was like that. And then afterwards, we started talking. He said, he said, "Oh, those stinking apostates." He didn't even realize he was an apostate. If you talk about the governing body like that, that's apostasy. So he said, because he knows Barbara and Joe Anderson too. He knows Joe real well. Mm-hmm. We started talking about them because apostasy, and I said they didn't leave because of doctrinal issues. They didn't leave because of that. They left because of the pedophilia. That's the reason why. Oh, all my elders are good. And then about a month after that, and he lives in New York, About a month after that is when the Attorney General in Pennsylvania got on there, and I know he saw it because it was on the East Coast. So I wonder what he's saying now about it. And I've given some examples down here that I knew of active witnesses that had kids that were molested that are still active witnesses. So anyway, that's they're out there. They're out there. They're out there. That's
Yep.
all I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's funny. They always talk about, and Chewy brings up a good point. They're out there. They are out there, and that's a good thing to think about, because there are members, other elders that would be totally opposed to everything this elder had said to Chewy. But you know what? It's funny because the JWs and the Watchtower are so quick to judge Christendom on things like that. They don't even realize that within Christianity, true Christianity, there's vast differences of opinion on these same subjects. And here's the difference in Christianity, and I'm speaking as a Christian minister now. In Christianity, we're allowed to disagree with each other, because we understand unity does not mean uniformity. So it's really interesting, because the Watchtower wants to build robots. They don't want free people. They don't want people who think for themselves. They want people who eat the food right out of their hand. And people, they can have a clump of manure in their hand, and they can be handing it out. Here, eat this, it's good for you. They don't want people who are going to question, I don't think that smells very nice. Is it really good for me? They want people who are going to say, oh, well, they say it's good for me, so it must be. And really, they're just feeding you a bunch of crap. And that's the reality of the matter. Anybody else got anything they want to share?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think the lady can go first.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your show. I've been listening. I just wanted to say thank you so much for bringing up the idea that even if you somehow mentally manage to figure out that this can't possibly be God's anything, and physically even manage to get yourself out of the organization, and mentally it's all a lie, the conditioning is so deep to not only not think for yourself, but even if you do start to think for yourself or have a thought that is not approved by Watchtower, you're programmed with that automatic knee-jerk reaction that's so deeply programmed into you. It's like, oh, that's apostate thinking, or oh, Satan's trying to take over my mind. I mean, they put all this, pre-programmed Watchtower switch buttons in you, but it's still there even when you know something's wrong. Even myself and a lot of ones who have come out, every once in a while it just hits you. Oh, what if they're right? Oh my God, what if Armageddon comes and I die? Oh my God, that horrible fear. And the brother, what he was saying is they don't want somebody that has their own mind. If you even give a hint that you're thinking of yourself, even if it's just one question or one thought, their first reaction is, do you doubt Jehovah's organization? Are you faithful to the faithful and discreet slave? Do you believe that they are, basically chosen by Jehovah God? And they want to know where your loyalty is, and they want to make sure that your programming is still really solidly in that brain, or they will get rid of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anne Marie. I appreciate that, and I always enjoy the things you have to say. Gentleman caller, go ahead.
Yes, hello?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yes. Well, thank you for taking my call here. I've been listening to everything with interest. Excuse me here a minute. I had to clear my throat there a little. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that this gentleman brought up the Constitution over there, and I've been quite often myself, and others have too, been bringing up the fact that the Watchtower Society is one of the biggest violators on the face of the earth of the First Amendment of our U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
They're one of the biggest violators of our civil and human rights. on the face of the earth and so forth. It's not to say that there's other religious societies that are the same, but they're one of the biggest ones and so forth. Our Constitution says we have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and we're supposed to be allowed to go into a church, and even join a religion, or if we don't like it, we're supposed to have the right to leave there. But you don't have those rights in the Watchtower Society. They're a total and absolute ecclesiastical and tyrannical dictator and so forth. And they want to control your life, from the cradle to the grave and so forth. So that should not be taking place in a country like the USA and so forth. And so we have to stand up and we have to put a stop to this kind of practice, not only amongst the Watchtower Society, but amongst all these religious societies who want to take away our freedom of religion rights away from us and any other constitutional right, because we need to restore the constitutional rights to all the people and restore the Constitution, to this country and so forth. Because if we don't, it's going to go down the tube, just pure and simple. So
Yes.
I appreciate all the effort that you're doing and everybody else that's calling in. We do appreciate the people that's stepping up to the plate and so forth and standing up to the Watchtower Society. So thank you for taking my call, sir, and you keep up the good work, and we'll just keep listening here.
Thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate the kind words. And boy, I tell you what, you're just right on the ball, man. You're just right there.
Okay, thank you, and God bless you, and we'll keep listening.
God bless you too, my friend.
Yeah.
Folks, this is getting to be a pretty common thing that I'm seeing with people who are leaving the Watchtower. Is they come into communities much like the one that kind of gravitates around the 6 screens of the Watchtower. And the thing I love about the 6 screens community is this: there is diversity and there is very little unity, and there is a ton of disagreement, and yet we're still kind to each other. And we still have bits and pieces about each other we do like and don't like. And we're still able to get along with each other. And yet the Watchtower says outside of the organization, outside of the truth, there is no unity. There is no true friendship. There is no true relationship. And I'm going to be honest here. I have a very unique ministry, and I deal with the kingdom of the cults. That's kind of my niche. And it's not just Jehovah's Witnesses, it's Mormons, Christian Science, Word of Faith, Theosophy, and just anything you can imagine. I've dealt with tons of different cults, and I thoroughly am a glutton for punishment because I actually enjoy the work I do. But it's funny because even the people I disagree with and disagree with me here on this network and in the XJW community, we're still united at least around the one idea that the Watchtower is wrong. Now, there's different degrees of that. We can all agree that they have made false prophecies. We can all agree that Armageddon did not happen in 1914, 1915, 1916, 1918, 1923, 25, 28, and 75. We can all agree that Armageddon didn't happen in all these years. We can all agree that that the patriarchs of the Old Testament were never resurrected and lived in Beth Sarim in California. We can all agree that the Watchtower was totally and unequivocally wrong about this. We can all agree that the CSA that was dealt with in part with the Australian Royal Commission, we are all in unanimous agreement. That is absolutely wrong. And yet there are elders in the Watchtower. Some think it's okay. Some think it's not. Because the ones who think it's okay say, well, you know what? This is just going to be left in Jehovah's hands and it's not our responsibility. Well, I'm sorry. I think basic human common decency says it is our responsibility. So that's my perspective. And I think most people are going to agree with me on that, at least on that one subject. So yeah, anybody else have anything they want to say? Please feel free, hit *6.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Hi. I have a couple questions, but is there any way that do you have an email or something for a question that I'd rather ask not on the
Sure. You can drop me an email, masterslanterns@gmail.com. masterslanterns@gmail.com. Also, if you look me up on Facebook, my name is Chad Burns, and I think I have a picture of me back up now. So, but yeah, feel free, drop me a email or go ahead and add me as a friend on Facebook, message me on Facebook, whatever you want.
All right, cool. Thanks. I appreciate the conversation. And I have a question.
Oh, no
I
problem.
put you on the spot. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Yep. All right. There was a gentleman in there that wanted to say something. Sir, are you still there?
Hello? Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask a question to you, and maybe you can expound on it. Excuse me.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that Ramapo project in New York is a modern day Beth Surim, like what you brought up? If I'm saying that wrong, sorry. Rutherford's mansion. Oh,
Right.
we're going to use it for the future, you know?
Honestly, I don't. I think this is all speculation, but honestly, I think what they're going to end up doing is they're going to end up creating their own television network that will be broadcast on satellite dishes over the internet 24/7. I think they're going to develop not only their own religious instruction program, but also I think they're going to develop evangelistic programs in the form of like sitcoms and romantic comedies and dramas, kind of like Law and Order or something, but a Jehovah's Witness version. So, I think they're going to probably end up going that way, especially when it comes to just the massive size of this thing that they're building. I could be wrong. What about you? What do you think about it? Okay.
Sorry, I had a little phone problem.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, I feel like they're always making excuses for what they're doing. Like because I believe a governing body member addressed it, and I don't know who it was. It might have been Anthony Morris. He said that a brother had written him a letter and said that he was disappointed to hear that Ramapo would take 3 years. Does that mean that Armageddon will take that much longer? And then he said, well, it's possible that we'll use it in the future. So that's what made me think that it's just like SRM. Oh, we're going to use it for Isaiah and Jeremiah because they're going to need a place to stay. And then they do the same thing. It seems like they're doing the same thing, making excuses for their fantasy.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to make the best Jesus film ever. That when they do this Jesus production, that they're going to insert themselves in it. The governing body are going to be the stars, basically. They're going to make themselves in it somehow. That's my thought, at least.
Yep.
That Rim is a private home now with a plaque. It's a lovely house.
Yes, it is, Pixie. Have you ever seen any of the overhead aerial pictures of the property?
I think the land is larger than most of us know,
It is.
but
It
it's
is.
a beautiful neighborhood.
It is. And just that house, the mansion, just looking at it with an overhead view, an aerial picture, it is beautiful, even looking at it that way. So I encourage people, get on over to Google Images or Google Earth and look it up. I mean, it's got some beautiful, it's just a beautiful house still, 100 years later. It really is. So, yeah. Well, folks, I'm looking at the clock here, and it looks like I am out of time for the week. But I will be back in about 2 weeks. Same bat time, same bat channel. I want to thank everybody who called in tonight, who's blowing up my Facebook right now with friend requests, and who's emailing me. Thank you all. And I just want to let you know that we are in the season of hope. And just because you're out of a cult, it doesn't mean you have to stay in it mentally. You can come out of it. You can have true freedom. The year's almost over. And we're going to be starting a new year. And I hope that you'll make the resolution that in this new year, you're going to start a new life. A life where you have hope. A life where you have freedom. A life where you have joy. So, folks, I will see you again in a couple weeks. And hopefully my host, Roland Smith, will be back by then. Roland, if you're watching or listening, I love you, my brother. Until next time, everyone, God bless you all. Hope you all have a great 2 weeks. Merry Christmas and good night. This is Chad Burns from Returning to Light saying I'll catch you later.
Well, very good, Chad. Thank you very much. This is Rick Farron at the control panel up here in Massachusetts. We had a good call tonight, a very good call, Chad. Lots of people coming in. We really appreciate their presence and speaking up. Boy, it makes all the difference in the world. So don't you guys be bashful tonight. We've got a number of more programs coming up tonight. So stay with us and go ahead and comment. By all means, call into the program. We'll have it posted if you're listening on YouTube. You'll be able to call into the program. So we're going to JW World News. That's coming up here next. So don't go anywhere. By all means, stay with us. I think you'll really, really enjoy the program. Yeah, we're just getting things set up here. I'm just changing over. We have to go to another platform now so we can get everything working just the way we want it to work. So just hang in here with us as we're doing it right now so that everything will be up and running. Let me just disconnect the program that Chad was just on. And we're going to end that broadcast. And great program. All right. So now what we're going to